In 1989, at a rundown rehearsal space near Dodger Stadium, Megadeth, now down to 3 members, were rehearsing songs for their next album. Once 3 songs were ready, they recorded demos at the crumbling Amigo Studios in North Hollywood. The band desperately needed a guitarist. Around this time, Ellefson became friends with Slash. Guns N' Roses had just returned from the Appetite for Destruction tour, and huge opportunities were opening up for them. But Slash was still living in a beat-up one-room apartment on Sunset Boulevard. The guys hung out often, jammed together, and wrote songs, but convincing Slash to become part of Megadeth proved impossible. Even though sobriety was becoming a growing trend among musicians at the time, these were some of the darkest days for Mustaine and Ellefson. They repeatedly entered rehab programs only to leave before completing them. As a result, Doc McGee, who was managing the band, did exactly what he had promised and cut business ties with them. The guys were broke and drowning in debt, and at that moment Mustaine was helped by the $5,000 royalty checks from Metallica that began arriving every month. Ellefson received a Citibank credit card with a $5,000 advance limit. They stopped showing up for rehearsals. At the same time, Chuck Behler's girlfriend became pregnant. He was struggling financially and stopped showing up as well. After a month-long break, Dave went to visit Chuck, but by then he was alone. His girlfriend had given birth and moved back in with her parents because Chuck couldn't get his addiction under control. It seemed like Dave had come to tell him something important, but in the end, he said nothing. Dave left, and Chuck never saw him again. Later, the accounting department sent Behler his tax paperwork and informed him that his housing would no longer be paid for. Shortly before leaving for Chicago, Chuck received a visit from Gar Samuelson, who told him that Megadeth now had a new drummer, Nick Menza. One evening, the phone rang at Nick's house. "This is Mustaine," he heard on the other end. Nick assumed it was a prank and hung up. The phone rang again. This time it was Ron Laffitte, Megadeth's new manager. He told Nick that Dave Mustaine doesn't call twice to offer someone a job. Nick was excited. He called Dave back, and the two agreed to see if they could work together. David Ellefson was assigned to meet Nick at a rehearsal studio for an audition. Afterward, Ellefson told Mustaine that Nick was exactly the drummer they needed. The first thing the 3-piece lineup recorded was a cover of Alice Cooper's No More Mr. Nice Guy for Wes Craven's 1989 horror film, Shocker. Soon afterward, another incident occurred. Mustaine was driving home along Ventura Boulevard when he was arrested for driving under the influence. Authorities found an impressive list of illegal substances in his system. Dave was ordered to undergo treatment. Although measures like that rarely had any effect on him, he gradually began pulling himself out of the hole he had fallen into. The circle of people around Ron Laffitte helped Dave make that happen. David Ellefson was making progress as well. Mustaine made it clear to him that if he didn't quit, he'd be out of the band. Dave moved in with his mother in Lake Elsinore so he could live away from temptation. It was there that he made his first skydive. In one interview, he said he wanted to try it, but a journalist misunderstood him and wrote that Mustaine had already gone skydiving. Dave's only option was not to be a liar and actually do it. It was exactly the kind of adrenaline rush he needed, and he became hooked. One day, while driving back from a skydiving center in California, Dave spotted an old beat-up car ahead of him on the road. On its bumper was a sticker that read, "May all your nuclear weapons rust in peace." At that moment, he immediately knew what Megadeth's next album would be called. Soon afterward, the band began an intensive search for a guitarist. Ellefson came up with the idea of offering the position to Dimebag Darrell from Pantera. He once attended one of their concerts in Dallas and even joined them on stage to perform Peace Cells at the club. Ellefson and Mustaine called him and offered him the job, but Dimebag agreed to join Megadeth only if his brother, drummer Vinnie Paul, came with him, so it never happened. The next idea was to bring in Annihilator guitarist Jeff Waters, but it never got beyond the discussion stage. Dave invited Chris Poland to contribute guitar solos to the new songs. He was paid $500 for each one. By that point, Chris was sober. He was afraid of relapsing, and because of that, their collaboration came to an end. Then came a long series of auditions. At times, the situations became absurd. One candidate looked like a cowboy. He plugged in his guitar and said they should show him the songs. Another claimed that he had written the intro to Wake Up Dead from the Peace Cells album. In most cases, Mustaine and Ellefson knew within 8 bars that a guitarist wasn't right for them. Eventually, they developed a system. When that moment came, they would exchange a glance, shut off the equipment, and walk out of the room. Nick was left with the task of escorting the unsuccessful candidate out. No one seemed like a perfect fit. Dave was beginning to lose hope of finding the right guitarist. In February 1990, Mustaine walked into Ron Laffitte's office and noticed Marty Friedman's solo album, Dragon's Kiss, sitting on the desk. Friedman had previously played in the band Cacophony. Dave immediately judged him as a poser based on his appearance. A shiny leather jacket, carefully styled hair, and two-tone black and orange curly locks. Laffitte insisted that Friedman deserved an audition. They put on the first track, and within 2 minutes, Dave was blown away. Marty Friedman was struggling to make ends meet. He lived in a rundown apartment in Hollywood and survived on rice and 99-cent candy. Just down the road was GIT, where he taught. He had already auditioned for Ozzy Osbourne, but they chose Zakk Wylde instead. That week, he was preparing to audition for Megadeth and then for Madonna. He had been told in advance to learn 5 songs. Marty bought a couple of Megadeth cassettes at a used record shop, and because he didn't know which parts he would be expected to play, he learned all of them. Then he received a phone call asking him to learn a few more songs. Then a few more. Eventually, the list grew to 13 songs. Some of the additional songs came from Killing Is My Business, which was difficult to find in used record stores. He ended up spending $13 on a brand new cassette, which meant going hungry for the rest of the day. Marty arrived at Powerplant Studios by bus, bringing along his friend, a guitar technician, and showing up an hour late. Dave saw him wearing torn shoes, skin-tight Ramones clothing, and carrying a red Carvin guitar with no case, along with a small amplifier. Thinking that Friedman's guitar would disappear beneath the wall of Marshall amplifiers Mustaine was playing through, Dave instructed the guitar technician to connect Marty's guitar to a Marshall amp on his side as well and step on the switch during the solos. Dave called out, "Wake Up Dead," and Nick started the count-in. As soon as Marty started playing, Dave noticed that he handled the rhythm parts extremely well. But when he switched to the solo, the world seemed to stop for Mustaine. In that moment, Dave knew he had found Megadeth's new guitarist. "That's enough for today," he said, then ran to a payphone. Calling Ron Laffitte, Dave announced that they had found their guitarist, but complained that he had a pop star surname that needed to be changed. Ron replied, "That's not happening. Friedman is already an established guitarist with a name and a solo album." Friedman's technique overshadowed everything Dave disliked about his appearance. Normally, all auditions were recorded on video, and afterward the guys would watch the tapes and laugh at the candidates. But this time, they never even went back to the footage. Instead, they decided to put Marty Friedman through Rock School 101. After he changed his wardrobe, dyed his hair a single color, and switched to a Jackson guitar, they told him, "We've got bad news for you. Dude, you're in the band." What followed was a period of methodical, dedicated work on new songs and flawless performances. Over the next year, Megadeth held more than 1,000 rehearsals. Hangar 18 grew out of old musical ideas Mustaine had been carrying since his days in Panic, combined with Nick Menza's fascination with aliens from the Roswell crash site. Dawn Patrol was born from David Ellefson's experiments with an 8-string Yamaha bass that Jimmy Bain of Dio had loaned him. It ended up being the last song added to the album. Once all the songs had been thoroughly rehearsed, the band began recording at Rumbo Studios. To produce the album, they hired Mike Klink, who at the time was working with Guns N' Roses on their third record. Since Axl had taken a break, Megadeth had the opportunity to use Klink's services. The first step was recording rough tracks of every song to establish the tempos. During the process, Mustaine watched Marty Friedman play and began to have doubts about his own abilities. He felt Marty was more talented, more refined, and that after all his years of playing, Dave himself had not progressed as a guitarist. Those thoughts ate away at him. One evening, when the group went to the whiskey, Dave relapsed and got drunk. From there, things quickly spiraled. Understanding how serious the situation was, Mustaine immediately checked himself into a clinic in Beverly Hills so he could return as quickly as possible and continue working. During treatment, he decided to end his now toxic relationship with Diana, whom he had been dating for 6 years. The lyrics to Tornado of Souls were born as a farewell letter addressed to her. Dave did not appear at the studio for an entire month, and during that time, David Ellefson and Nick Menza recorded all of their parts. Then it was time to record rhythm guitars, but Dave was still absent. Marty Friedman moved on to recording solos. Soon, however, he began feeling sensations in his right hand that resembled electric shocks. After consulting a doctor, he learned that the nerves and tendons in his hand had been severely damaged from overuse. He was told that he might never be able to play guitar again because his hand could become paralyzed. Refusing to believe it, Friedman sought a second opinion, only to receive the same diagnosis. His arm was wrapped in bandages, and to hide it he began wearing a long-sleeved hoodie, something highly unusual in Los Angeles. When Marty recorded his parts, there were usually very few people around. Normally, he would record numerous takes and later choose the best one. This time, everything came down to just 2 takes. When Mustaine finally returned to the studio, they played him the solo for Tornado of Souls. When the track ended, he shook Marty's hand and walked out of the room. Mustaine recorded his first solo for Holy Wars in a single take. This time, he attacked his guitar parts with particular enthusiasm. As the album neared completion, Mike Klink received a call from Axl Rose informing him that he was ready to continue working. A replacement had to be found. To mix the album, they brought in the talented Dave Jordan, who had worked on Jane's Addiction's debut album. When Mustaine entered the room, he saw Jordan smoking cigarettes while eating a chili-covered sausage. Dave didn't like that. When he's trying to quit smoking, everyone should be trying to quit smoking. Jordan's extreme level of control over the project also irritated him, and eventually Mustaine pointed him toward the door. He told the others that there were too many Daves. In the end, the album was mixed by Max Norman, who was famous for his work on Ozzy Osbourne's first 2 albums. The album cover was created by Ed Repka, who had previously designed the cover for Peace Sells. Rust in Peace was released on September 24, 1990, and immediately elevated Megadeth to a new level. Widely praised by both critics and fans, eventually achieving platinum status, it pulled the band members out of debt and opened entirely new horizons for them.